Picture this. A tiny shorebird, maybe sparrow-sized, with this absolutely bizarre but kind of perfect miniature spatula for a beak. It's the spoon-billed sandpiper. And honestly, there's just nothing else quite like it. BirdLife International even calls it the world's cutest wader. And when you see that little spoonbill scooping around, you can kind of see why.
It's definitely a striking feature, yeah. And that unique bill, it isn't just for show. It's perfectly adapted for how they feed. They rapidly sweep it side to side in shallow mud, sifting out tiny invertebrates. But this charming little bird is facing a really, really serious crisis. That's why we've pulled together, the latest research observations for this deep dive, tailored just for you.
Right. And while they are, completely captivating, especially in their summer feathers with that bright reddish head and chest, this deep dive isn't just about how cute they are. We're looking at a species in, frankly, grave danger. To really get the urgency, you need to understand the incredible journey these tiny birds make. They breed way, way up in these isolated Arctic spots in northeast Russia, Chukotka and Kamchatka.
And from those super remote nesting grounds, they set off on this, astonishing migration. We're talking a flight of roughly 8,000 kilometers.
8,000 kilometers.
Yeah, all the way down the East Asian-Australasian Flyway. You should think of this flyway as a sort of migration superhighway. It's used by an incredible 50 million water birds, and they all rely on these crucial wetland stopover sites spread across, 22 different countries, just to fuel up for their journeys.
Just pause on that 8,000 kilometers for a bird that small. It's mind-boggling. And they need these traditional spots to refuel, eventually getting to their wintering grounds in Southeast Asia, places like Bangladesh, Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, even parts of southern China. It's just an epic feat of endurance.
It truly is remarkable, but sadly, despite this incredible migration and the unique charm of the species, the main issue is stark. The spoon-billed sandpiper is critically endangered. BirdLife International estimates fewer than 500 adult birds left. That's not many at all. And despite really significant conservation efforts going on throughout Asia and beyond, their numbers are still dropping. We are genuinely in a race against time here.
Okay, let's unpack this dramatic decline then. Because it wasn't always this critical, was it?
No, the situation really took a sharp downturn. The early 2000s saw just an alarming collapse, a total freefall. BirdLife reported they were losing half their entire population every 2 years back then.
Every 2 years.
Yeah, that incredibly rapid decline meant they went from vulnerable to endangered in 2004, and then bam, just 4 years later in 2008, to critically endangered. That's the highest threat level there is.
Half the population every 2 years. Wow. That paints a terrifying picture, like a species just plummeting towards extinction. What do the more recent numbers tell us? Is it still that bad?
Well, the most recent big assessment was from 2021, research led by Rees Green. That study estimated only around 773 birds remained in total, and maybe 490 of those were breeding adults. This research also worked out an average annual reduction of about 9% between 2009 and 2016.
Okay, so 9%. That rate of decline has slowed down a bit compared to that, devastating period in the early 2000s. That's something, I guess. A sliver of good news.
It is a less drastic rate, yes. But it's really vital to understand that a 9% drop every year is still a very, very significant and concerning decline. The overall trend remains deeply worrying. I mean, to really illustrate how bad things felt, Christoph Zuckler, who coordinates the Spoon-billed Sandpiper Task Force, he said something really stark back in 2010. He said, "It looked like we were staring extinction in the face, and there would be no spoon-billed sandpipers left by the end of the decade."
Chilling. That really brings it home, how critical it was then, and still is. So what are the main things driving this? Let's start at the beginning. Their breeding grounds in Russia. You'd think being so remote would protect them somewhat.
You would think so, but unfortunately, remoteness doesn't equal safety. BirdLife points to several challenges right there in Chukotka and Kamchatka. About 1 in 6 known breeding sites, they've seen significant habitat degradation. And then you have more local threats, like nests near villages getting destroyed by dogs.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and natural predation from things like Arctic foxes and skuas. They take a toll on the chicks. And believe it or not, even hunting pressure in Kamchatka is a worry. One survey suggested something like 6,000 small shorebirds, possibly including spoonies, were killed there in 2019 alone. It's almost overwhelming, isn't it? All these hurdles right at the start.
Wow, that's a lot to face before they even start migrating.
Yeah.
And then looms the big one, climate change.
Absolutely. Christoph Zuckler sees climate change as potentially the most significant long-term threat. He says it's essentially squeezing the species out of options. The modeling suggests over half More than half of their suitable breeding habitat could become unsuitable within the next 50 years, just gone. Because of the changing climate, that's a massive long-term challenge.
Okay, so they face all that just to breed. Then they launch into this incredibly risky 8,000-kilometer flight. What dangers are waiting for them along that East Asian-Australasian Flyway?
Right, the Flyway. While it's vital for millions, it's also full of dangers. Habitat loss and degradation at those crucial stopover sites are huge issues. In particular, the draining and reclaiming of intertidal areas, especially around the Yellow Sea. That's had a devastating impact. These mudflats, you see, they're essential feeding grounds. It's where migrating shorebirds, including spoonies, have to build up the energy reserves they need for the rest of the flight. And why is it happening? Often aquaculture, big development projects.
You mentioned a really stark example earlier, didn't you? Manjum in South Korea. Remind us about that.
Yes, so Manjum. It used to be a really key gathering point. Hundreds of spoon-billed sandpipers would start there during migration. But then, back in the 2000s, they built the world's longest seawall there. Result, reclamation of a staggering 400 square kilometers of vital mudflats, just paved over, basically.
200 square kilometers.
Yeah, and since that massive habitat loss, only one single spoon-billed sandpiper has ever been recorded at that site again. One.
Just one.
It's a brutal illustration of how critical these areas are, without enough places to feed and rest on that exhausting journey.
Well, as BirdLife puts it quite poignantly, these birds are literally flying themselves to death.
Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to imagine the scale of that loss and what it means for these tiny birds.
That's a heartbreaking image. Okay, so habitat loss along the Flyway, huge problem. What about direct threats, like hunting?
Dean Lee Young, who's BirdLife's regional flyways coordinator, he considers trapping on passage and in their wintering grounds to be maybe the greatest threat right now, especially the immature birds. They often stay in the non-breeding areas for up to 2 years before they breed themselves, and they're particularly vulnerable. They get tangled in nets that are actually set to catch larger waders for food.
And it's not just like the odd accidental capture. There's evidence it's a more widespread issue. Sadly, yes. There was a survey in Bangladesh. 8 out of 53 hunters they interviewed reported catching 22 spoon-billed sandpipers just in the previous winter.
22 by just 8 hunters.
Yeah, gives you a sense of the scale in just one place. And then research in Myanmar between 2008 and 2010 indicated a wintering population of over 200 spoonies in the Bay of Martaban. That was possibly more than half the world's population at the time. And that study found widespread evidence of wader hunting right there.
And it's not always that hunters are specifically targeting the spoonies, is it? They just get caught up in nets meant for other birds.
Exactly. The International Wader Study Group highlighted that. Spoon-billed sandpipers are frequently caught unintentionally, bycatch, caught in mist nets set for other shorebirds like Pacific golden plovers or Eurasian curlews. Their research basically concluded that hunting in these key wintering areas is likely a major driver of the decline. And it's worse because the spoonies' main wintering spots overlap with areas that have high hunting activity. It's a perfect storm, really.
It paints such a grim picture. Just this multitude of threats across their entire year. But it's not all bad news. There are some big conservation efforts happening, right?
That's absolutely right, thank goodness. There is a truly dedicated and impressive international effort working to save them. The Spoon-billed Sandpiper Task Force coordinates the species action plan everyone's agreed on, and this involves a whole range of crucial stuff, like enforcement against illegal trapping has been increased in key spots, and there are education programs, outreach, specifically targeting school kids to raise awareness.
Yeah, I remember reading about initiatives supporting hunters to find other ways to make a living. That sounds really vital.
It is indeed. In Bangladesh, China, Myanmar, there have been important projects helping hunters transition to alternative livelihoods, things that don't involve trapping birds. And they've shown some really encouraging results. Like in Myanmar's Gulf of Matama, a really significant percentage of hunters who got support from Banka, that's BirdLife's partner there, they've agreed to stop hunting. And many say their new livelihoods are stable, sometimes even better. It just shows the importance of focusing resources on proven strategies that tackle the root causes.
That's genuinely encouraging, a sign of what can be done. What about more direct interventions, like captive breeding?
Yes, there are what we call ex situ conservation efforts, basically conservation outside their natural habitat. The Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust in the UK started a captive breeding program back in 2011, sort of a last resort safety net. The captive population got up to 25 birds, and they even had successful breeding in 2019, which was great news, though sadly the number is down to 7 now. And alongside that, Birds Russia has been running a head starting program since 2012.
Head starting, how does it work?
It's pretty clever. They carefully collect some eggs from wild nests, incubate them in a safe, controlled environment, and then raise the chicks in aviaries. This protects them during those really vulnerable first few weeks. Then, when they're strong enough and ready to migrate, they release them back into the wild. And this technique is estimated to boost their survival chances, like fivefold.
Fivefold, wow. That sounds like giving them a really crucial leg up during that dangerous early stage. And conservationists are also tracking the birds, aren't they, to learn more about where they go?
Absolutely crucial work. They've been fitting individual birds with these tiny, uniquely numbered leg flags, little plastic tags. By 2019, these flag birds had been seen something like 800 times across 7 different countries. That gives invaluable data on migration routes, wintering grounds, where they actually go, and they've also used miniature satellite tags on some birds. These have provided an astonishing amount of really important detail, specific routes, timing, even previously unknown stopover sites they rely on, and even how they react to environmental changes along the way. It's amazing what they can learn from those tiny transmitters.
It sounds like they're slowly piecing together a much clearer picture of their movements and what they need, but there are still gaps, right? Things we don't know.
Oh, definitely. The task force estimates there are still large gaps in understanding their distribution across the whole flyway. We still don't know the specific breeding locations for a big chunk of the population, or exactly where many of them spend the winter. So more survey work is absolutely crucial to fill those knowledge gaps. Organizations like BirdLife and their partners are actively ramping up surveys in key, understudied areas like Vietnam, for instance.
And knowing where they are is the vital first step to actually protecting those habitats, isn't it?
Precisely. You can't protect a place if you don't know the birds rely on it. And there have been important habitat protection wins, like the Bird Conservation Society of Thailand successfully buying Pak Tail, a really critical shorebird site in Thailand. In Myanmar, Banta is working closely with local communities, building their capacity for long-term monitoring in the vital Gulf of Matama. And advocacy work has led to some big wins too, like getting destructive land reclamation projects stopped in China and achieving World Heritage Site status for crucial tidal flats in South Korea. Those are big deals.
So with all these combined efforts, all this work, has it made a real difference to that scary rate of decline?
Christoph Zuckler says yes, definitely. All this dedicated work across the entire flyway has resulted in a significant slowing of the decline. It went from that truly alarming 26% per year down to a still worrying but lower rate of about 7-10% per year. He rightly calls this a phenomenal achievement, showing the impact of sustained conservation action. But he also wisely cautions that this slower rate is still not enough. Not enough to secure their future, especially when you look at the recent, very worrying results from the winter surveys.
Ah, yes, those recent surveys in the Gulf of Matama. That's such a key wintering site for them, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. The Gulf of Matama in Myanmar, it's thought to potentially support as much as 60% of the entire global population. So what happens there, both to the habitat and the birds, has a massive impact on the species overall.
And the latest survey from January 2023, the findings were pretty concerning, I gather.
Very concerning indeed. The survey, it was a big collaborative effort. The task force, NCS Myanmar, support from groups like MCF, MHF, STC. They even involved former bird hunters in collecting data, which is great. They recorded about 60,000 waders in total, 53 different species.